The next thing we're going to want to do is install this little metal basket, this wiring basket, underneath the panel of the bike, this floor plate. So they have these little screws holding them in here. We're just going to drill those out. And now you can see that the floor plate will kind of lift up very easily, and that slides right into place like that. These are rivet screws, so you can get a rivet gun for a few bucks if you want to rivet it back down. You can use machine screws as well. I'm probably going to remove the two up front. That way I can lift this floor plate up a little bit easier and have more access to be able to hook up all my electronics inside the wiring box there. Here we have our digital display, just a simple Phillips head. We're going to loosen that up and clip it right around the bar and tighten it in there. And then take this cord and we're going to follow it along here and then down and underneath the center floor plate to go attach to the wiring box, and use the zip ties to secure it to the frame so you don't have the loose wire. So we've gotten this tightened down here, but you can notice it's still a little bit loose. So you can kind of secure it with the zip ties when you secure the cord, but it can still wiggle around. That's because this opening here on the little plastic clamp is a little bit wider diameter than this tube that goes through here. So if you want to get it secure, if you just put something in there, some kind of padding or a little piece of like rubber or something that can grip it to make it just a little bit thicker as that clamps around it, that can hold it right in place so that it always stays at whatever angle you set it. But you'll have to put some kind of little padding in there. You can see it's just a little bit too big for the diameter of this tube right there. That's how you get it if you want it nice and secure. I'm going to go over how to wire up everything inside the wiring box here. Two critical pages in the installation guide here. First, the wiring diagram. Note this little critical notion right here. That's it. The yellow attaches to the green and the green to the yellow. This is critical. If this is reversed, you risk frying your controller or frying your motor, just shorting it out. So that's critical to make sure you have that connection right. And this just shows a visual of all the wires kind of pulled out so you can visually see where they go and connect. But let's go through those right now. We're going to look at our controller. You've got these 5 main wires that come out that have a screw or terminal connection. So the black and the red right here, this is your power line. So that's the power going into the controller kind of from the battery, which will go through your circuit breaker. The other 3 are the power lines that go to the motor. So you got this blue, green, and kind of this yellowish color here. These are going to attach right to the power lines on the motor. So you see you got that blue, green, and yellowish. But again, the green goes to the yellow and the yellow goes to the green. If you attach them green to green, yellow to yellow, you'll short something out. You also, out of the motor, have the hall line. Just so you can trace that back, this is the wire coming out of the motor. This is the hall line, which kind of tells the motor what to do. So again, these 3 are giving it the power. This is telling it how much power to give it. Just a simple clip right here that'll clip into this clip on your controller. You also have these other connection points. One will be for your pedal sensor, which we have not installed yet. I've got it just laying down over there. That's just a simple clip. It can only clip into one that is made to fit it, which is this one right here. Then you have your display. So we have the display that's wired up and hanging down right now. We'll secure that with zip ties, but again, this has one connection point that it can fit into, and it just clips right into there. Then you're going to have your these other connections right here. One of them is going to be for the battery, or I'm sorry, the headlights, which we're not hooking up headlights on this bike. This one is just going to have the LED battery-powered lights. The other connectors are for blinkers and brake lights and things like that. Again, this controller is a universal ekit e-bike controller, so we're not using these other connections. You can just leave them laying out like that. First, we're just going to feed all these wires into the wiring box for everything we've got. That'd be the wire going from the motor. And you got this hall line. You see the wiring box has these little circular openings. Some of them have these rubber gaskets. That's just a little protection so the wire doesn't pull on there quite as much. It's a very tight fit, as you can see. I've actually pulled one of the gaskets off for this hull line for the motor, it's easier if you take the gasket off and work it through like this. Get it on camera there, so you can fit it through, and then fit all these wires through it as well. Now I can fit that into the wiring basket here. So let me put that in one at a time. There you go. Now stick those through. And just kind of feed everything into the wiring basket. And then this little gasket. There we go. I can stick that back in to the opening, and that again just gives the wire a little protection from that sharper metal edge going in there. I'll work that into back into position there. Now, notice I just had this going over top. I actually want this to go underneath. So this is the wire again to the battery. So instead of taking that all out, which is kind of a pain, I'm going to take the whole basket out and just come from underneath like this and put it right back where it was. I want this wire coming out of here to be underneath this piece. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to zip tie right here and feed that into the basket. That way this wire going to the motor doesn't hang down or get snagged on anything. It goes right underneath there and into the wiring basket like that. Let me hold the camera up so you can see. This goes right under there into the basket. Now we have the pedal sensor wire, which is going to basically follow from the driver's side pedal. You're going to zip tie it underneath here so that it's up out of the way and doesn't get snagged on the chain. It's going to come across here just like the motor wire and come in through the back. So we can go ahead and just insert that. I'm inserting it right into the same slot there and just pull that into place. So now I've got my pedal sensor connection inside there. The display is going to come from the front of the wiring box. So I have my display connection. I'm going to want to reach around to the front of the wiring box here and just stick it into one of the front holes in one of those rubber gaskets on the front if you have that available. And I'm just feeding that in. Let me open up. You can see there is the display connection right there. So now we have all our connections in here except for the power lines for the battery. So let's go ahead and get everything connected up, because the battery power will be the last piece that we connect together. To make your battery connections, you can see in the illustration, this is the wire that comes with the lead acid batteries. There's one solid wire that has a red and blue in it. The red will go into your terminal block, which is this, and the blue is going to connect, or sorry, the red's going to go into your circuit breaker, and the blue into the yellow terminal block, and just connect right here to one of these. It'll have a connection point that looks like this, so it can easily just go on that and then take this little nut and screw it on top once you connect the other wire. When you get the batteries from Amazon, it's going to come with a connection piece that looks like this. So this is going to plug right into your battery, but this essentially is the same as in the diagram here, where you have your red going into the circuit breaker, just like so. You notice it's just a little compression fitting. You probably have to take some wire cutters and just cut the wire sheath away a little bit right here so that it can fit in and get a good hold, and you'll tighten that down. And then the other end is going to go right into the terminal block, and you'll probably want to get a little wire connection, a piece like this. The kit and the battery will not come with that. Let me try to zoom in, but you'll want something like that, a little clamp to attach to the end of the wire here. That way it's easy to attach right to the terminal block. Once you do that, then you're able to easily plug and play the battery from Amazon with a secondary battery, or to take it down if you need to charge it and remove it or anything like that. So I went ahead and cut away a little bit more of the sheath from the red wire. I'm going to insert it into the terminal block, and then just take a screwdriver and tighten it up right here until that locks into place. So you can see as I Screw it tighter. That little clamp is clamping down on the wire. Get that nice and tight and secure so that that wire is not coming out of there. And now that that's attached. There we go. I've pulled the wiring basket out so you can see the circuit breaker. You can either set up where you reach your finger in one of these little holes. Most of the newer ones have this cut out where the breaker will fit right through here. And that's just so that the on-off switch is easily accessible. Anytime you're disconnecting the battery or doing any work, you definitely want to flip the breaker off so that there's no power going to the controller, the motor, or anything else. You can secure this just with some zip ties right through the frame here. The breaker has these little holes that go through it that can zip tie it just down into place. That way it's stays put right there. It might wiggle just a little bit, but it will stay where you can easily access it. You also want to make sure that when you put this down in, that this isn't pressed up against here so that you're not able to access the breaker. It's too close to the frame of the bike. You'll want it just back an inch or so when you secure it down so that you can easily access the breaker from underneath here. And just following the diagram, you can see here's the breaker. We have the one wire from the battery going into the breaker, and then we need the other wire coming out the other side. So that'll be the wire that goes right here into your first terminal block. So the way you'll have it set up is once this wire is connected into here, it'll look like this. So this is your power from your battery, the red going in through your terminal and then back out onto one side of the terminal block, and then the black right from the battery going right into the terminal block. And then this will connect to the power lines, the black and the red, from the controller, like so. Get the black and the red out. So the black will attach right here, and the red right here. Again, I need to get a connector piece for this black wire right there, and I'll get that. So here is our total power connection all the way to the controller. So this is the power line coming in from the battery. So these will be coming in. This is to the plug that would go to the lithium-ion battery, but the same two wires would be coming in if it's from the 12-volt, 512-volt lead-acid batteries. The red's going to come in through your breaker. Then you have your breaker wire go right to your terminal block, and then that's connected to the red wire going into your controller. And then the black coming in from the battery goes right to the terminal block. And then the black goes to the black wire connecting to your controller. Just like in the image, the battery wire, power wire coming in, going into your terminal block, out the other side, going to the red wire. And the black wire, if you get the lead acid batteries, it'll be blue coming out of here. That'll be connected to the black wire going right to the controller. So notice I've set this all up outside of the wiring box here. It's a lot easier to get all your some of these connections made here and then kind of place everything in. Then you just simply clip the wires together. The last connection will be to the power wire going to the motor. That's these three wires here. Note on the terminal blocks, the main power from the battery, you're just using the two outside ones. When you have the power lines going to the motor, you'll use all three connections here. So now we've placed the controller inside the wiring box here. We're going to put the breaker in, all the components. Before we put all in, we're just going to make our connections. So the power lines and the hall line coming from the motor right here, we're just going to clip those together. You can see the clip just puts into place like that. You get a good seal there, a good connection. This is your line coming up from the display that comes up from the front. So let's find the connection point that fits that. That's right here. We're going to clip that one together. And note the plug orientations, it's got these little clips on it so they can go in, make sure that they go in the right direction. Make sure you got a good connection there. And then we have our pedal sensor just right here. And let's find the connection piece for that. And it is this one right here. So we're just going to connect our pedal sensor together so we're all hooked up there. Good connection. So all the connections are made except for the power line going to the motor. And again, here's our power line coming in. And this is going to be where we make that different color connection. Let's go ahead and take our terminal block here. I'm going to go ahead and connect the blue. So the blue does go to the blue. So we got the blue line coming from the motor, going into the blue line that goes to the controller. Let's put those right in the middle there. And again, I haven't hooked up power, so there's no risk of shock or anything at this point. I'm just going to put that little nut on there, get them lined up, and just finger tighten it now just to hold it in place. We'll make sure we get those good and tight on all the connections before we turn on any power. You don't want it to be loose and then create some kind of arcing from a loose connection. So we're going to put the green wire over here. And again, this is the critical part. The green does not go to this green. It goes to this one here, this yellowish looking color. So that's going to connect right there. And then we're going to put a little nut on top of that to hold it down and tighten up. Got it threaded a little crooked. There we go. Helps if you have another set of hands to hold the forward plate out of your way or hold the wire straight. There we go. Just get that into place, and then the final connection here, this yellow to green. And I seem to have misplaced the last nut. That was it. Nut. And so here we go. The last connection, that yellow to green. And let's put the nut on there. And tighten that up. Now note again, you have the yellow to green, blue to blue, green to yellow. That's the critical connection that a lot of people overlook. It seems intuitive that the colors would line up, but in this case they don't. That's just the way that this controller is wired. If you wire those backwards, high risk of shorting out your controller or potentially the motor. Both are components you can order from our website independently. If you have an issue with them or do short them out, they are expensive, so ideally you don't want to short out your controller or your motor. I'm just going to tighten these up real quick with this little socket head here. Make sure I get those nice and tight. And now all my connections are made, and I'm just going to tuck everything into place. You do want to take these little covers on your terminal blocks just to protect them so that those open connections, if anything touches that, it could cause a shock. So just cover those up, and they do have little bolts that they come with here, just a Phillips, to keep those terminal block connections secured, and same on your power connection here. And I'll get a screwdriver and tighten those up. Side there just for extra safety, I guess, extra security. One's probably enough to get the job done. Go. And then the final one. Again, if you have the LED headlights that are wired to the bike, they do plug in here as well. We're not hooking those up on this install. But it's a simple just play, just like any of the plug and play, like all the other connections. Again, you can zip tie and secure all these wires and breakers, connection points down. That's usually a good thing to do. For today, we're just going to get this put in for now. Again, we're going to put the breaker right in here, and this power connection line to the battery, we're going to have lead out right here, like this. Everything's tucked in. Let's see, we got some legs sticking up a little bit. I'll zip tie all those down in a moment. Everything's secure and in place. So now we just need to zip tie our wires back up. This is going to be right where your battery can plug in. The battery from Amazon is going to sit right on top. It's just a simple plug connection, and then we have power to the unit. You can strap this down. That's usually the easiest way to secure it. You can also get the battery boxes. So if you get the option without the batteries, it does not come with the battery box. This box is made to fit the sealed lead acid batteries. Same thing, you'll want to secure this down to the frame of the bike. Best way to do it is to drill some holes, and you can either zip tie or put straps down so that you can secure the battery box just to the frame so that it can't slide off. And then the 12-volt batteries would line up nicely in there. Do note that you can fit this inside. Fits in nicely. You can actually stack two of them on top of one another. You'll probably need to cut a little hole in the box for the power line to come out so it can make the connection right down here. On our batteries, when you have the 12-volt lead acid batteries, the terminal connections will be on the top, and then you'll have, this will be your power line coming out for charging it. So your charging will be on the top, and then you'll have your power cord that actually come out of here and go down and connect down into the battery like so. But again, definitely recommend the lithium ion. Much lighter weight, lower in cost, easier to swap out, easier to charge, much better option all around. When connecting the lead acid batteries, the power line is going to come out of the top of the battery box and go straight down. As you can see in the picture here, it comes straight down in front of the floor plate. And in this example, we've cut the floor plate a little bit short. You could also drill a hole in the floor plate so it can go right under it. The power line coming down can come either in the front or the back, whichever is more convenient. And on the other side will be the charging port. Here is what the battery box looks like looking down into the box with the 5 12-volt lead acid batteries hooked up. You can see at the top of the image you have the first battery. This is where the red and the blue power lines go into the bike and connect to the battery. The red hooks up to the upper left terminal in the image, and the blue actually connects to the second battery in this set, the second from the top on the blue side of the terminals. Then you have one long wire that connects from the upper right to the bottom left, the red and blue, and the 3 going across to hook the batteries up in series. At the bottom, you see the charging port. The black side will connect to the second battery where the power line goes into the controller, and the other side will connect up at the top left red side where the power is to the controller. In the assembly guide, we have a sketch of this wiring diagram. Okay, so we've got everything hooked up. The only thing we have not installed yet is the pedal sensor. That's kind of the last step. We're going to do some tests with it before we install it. Got our battery placed here. We're going to make our power connection, and these are wired so that they can only be plugged in the correct orientation. Let's make that connection there. Now remember, I'm going to reach under here and flip on my breaker. Now I've got power to the unit. So let's check that that's on. We're going to have to go up and look at our digital display. And let's come up and turn on the bike from our display. Just hold the power button down for a moment and it should light up. So first we just need to remove the whole crank arm here. And the first step is to take this little dust cap off. Just take a small screwdriver. You can usually just kind of pry that right off. Just a little plastic dust cap. Really doesn't do anything, mostly cosmetic. This bolt in here is what we need to remove to pull the crank arm off. Once we do that, then we can install the pedal sensor on the pedal there. So there's 2 different tools that you can use to do this. They're essentially the same thing. One, it threads onto the crank arm. If you look right inside, get a little closer there, you can see that the crank has threads on the inside here. So this tool, these little threads are going to go into there, or you can use this, which includes a wrench already on it. The one that doesn't include a wrench, all you need is an adjustable wrench or socket on the other end of it to actually do the twisting to pull the crank arm off. Once we have our dust cap off, we just want to remove this bolt right here. The crank remover tool will come with a socket that will fit on there. I'm just going to use a socket wrench that I have handy. do this. There we go. Let's get it loose. Take that little pin out. As you look in there, the crank now is just set on the spindle here. We just need to pull it off, and that's what the crank remover tool does. So one thing to note on the inside here, you see it's a square fitting. This round end piece kind of has like a little head on it. If I put that in there, it won't fit inside of that square opening. It's actually resting on the crank arm itself. So as we thread that in, it's not going to pull the arm off. It's going to be pushing against itself. So this actually will not work for this bike. We're going to need one smaller. It's going to look like this. So this tool is going to work. And I can test fit it and see that this little end point here is going to fit in that and actually press against the spindle, so that when I thread this in and then twist it, it's going to pull this arm off of the spindle, which is what we want to happen. You want to be real careful when you're threading in the crank puller tool, as the threads inside the crank sometimes can be kind of thin or delicate, and you don't want it to cross thread. If you totally cross thread the threads inside the crank here, where you just can't get anything to grab it, what you can do at that point, and there's no other way to get the crank off, is take your cutoff tool, your Dremel, and just cut the bottom of the crank arm right here. You can cut it right off, and then the crank should fall off, and put a whole new crank piece on. They're pretty cheap, standard bike crank, if you had to do that. Hopefully you won't get it cross-threaded, and you can get that in there. So we got it threaded in pretty deep. Now we're just going to rotate our crank puller till we get that pin to press in against the spindle, and hopefully pull our crank arm right off of the bike. Looks like we're pretty locked up now. That's coming loose. And once you get past that little tight point, then it comes off nice and easily. And then you'll remove the crank tool and just slide it back on and use that bolt to secure it when reattaching. So when you're installing your pedal sensor, it's always best to test fit it. It should rotate the way the pedals are going to rotate, kind of going with the teeth in this direction. So you can put your finger in and get a test spin with the bike on, and I can hear the motor starting to engage. So I know that that's the proper way that it should be spinning, and that's the way it should mount onto the bike. We have seen some of these that are wired backwards where they will spin the other way against the teeth. That's kind of what they've used to be, but they seem that they've rotated or switched them. So always test fit it first, so that you save yourself the trouble of having to take your crank arm off and back on, should it be wired up a little differently. And that's just going to slide right onto your spindle there. Press it all the way in, and that's it. If you have this kind of extra rim right here, the pedal sensor guard will not fit properly. This was really just made to help protect the pedal sensor just a little bit. It would essentially go like that and fit right onto the bike. However, with this extra little metal rim here on the newer bikes, the sensor guard will not fit over that. So if you do have this piece, the sensor guard, it's not necessary. This will protect your pedal sensor and give it enough edge so that this isn't sticking up over the edge of the frame of the bike here. So again, the pedal sensor guard, really optional, but if you have this piece here, you don't need it. If you do not, then you can put it on, and it would just go just like that on the bike, and that just gives a little protection around the sensor. Now I've got my pedal sensor on. I'm going to reinstall my pedal. Note that it does have a square opening, and there's a square spindle here, so you want to line it up with the square. The main thing to look for is the other pedal. You want it to be at the opposite orientation. You don't want to install them both down or both in the same position. You won't be able to pedal. So make sure it's opposite, and then you just slide it right onto the spindle like so, and that it's opposite of the other side. Then you're going to take this bolt here and put it right back in and put your socket on it and cover it with your dust cap cover. Hold my crank so I can tighten it a little bit. Hold the pedal there. There we go, nice and tight. And my dust cap cover. which it seems to have rolled away. There it is. Let's put that back on there. And that just popped right back into place, and now you're all set. Last step is just to take all these wires that we have here and make sure everything is secured under the frame of the bike using zip ties. That way no wires can get snagged on any of the chains, pedals, your foot, up in the tires, anything like that. We're just about done here. Note we have the display zip tied going down underneath here. You see all the zip ties just holding this wire, which chases right under here and into it, into the wiring box. And then our pedal sensor, we have our zip ties going through. One thing to note is when you're wiring the pedal sensor does need to come through this loop of the chain. So it'll chase right through here on the frame. It'll come through. So if you've already connected it without it going through that loop, you'll just need to unplug it from inside the wiring box, channel it through here, right underneath here like that, following these zip ties. You can use the same zips for the power line for the motor and the pedal sensor coming in here and going into your wiring box underneath. So we have our, let's see if I can look underneath there, our breaker right there to turn the unit on and off. Getting that wiring box, you can secure it in place. I usually leave them like that so it has more wiggle room. Note the rivets that we removed to get into there. I usually don't even put them back in. Sometimes I will in the middle. I like to keep them out so if you ever need to change anything or unplug it, it's just one less step to have to do. Once you strap this down or secure the battery box on top, it'll hold the floorboard in place where these little rivets aren't even needed. So we have our power connected right here. This is the charger for this battery. Again, you could stack two of these on top. You could put them in your own custom box. You could get one of our battery boxes and put these in. But this bike is all wired up and ready to go. I usually like to just secure it with a simple nylon strap. Holds it right there to the floor plate, nice and easy to buckle and remove whenever you need to remove it. Again, you can put these in your own battery box. You can get one of ours, or just a simple strap, bungee cord, rope, even packing tape, anything just to hold it so the battery's not sliding around if you hit a little bump or go on a slant. I have seen people mount these underneath the seats, creating a little mount that hangs under here, and then just run this wire, get a longer lead wire that'll plug up into here so it's up under the seat and completely out of the way of the feet. As you can see, when you're sitting on the bench, the battery comes to probably just about right at the tip of this, so your feet are mostly going to be here, but sometimes feet can rest on that. It shouldn't be an issue as long as you're not standing on it, putting any weight. You don't want to do that where you could potentially damage the batteries inside there.